Okay, hello everyone. Uh, my name is Asher Reagan. I work at the Rothschild Foundation, and I'm going to be your host for this meetup. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're very excited to host you, and I want to thank all the guests who have come and all the speakers who are going to be with us, including the head of digital strategy at the National Library, Joran Deutscher, Avi Warshawski, the head of mindset, and Adia Ron-Gilat, who is the head of the Google Moonshot Factory at Google X in Israel, who will be speaking to you. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about the competition, what we're trying to achieve, and what we hope you all will help us do in the future. So like I said, my name is Asher Reagan. I work at the Rothschild Foundation, which is a private philanthropic foundation in Israel. As a foundation, we are committed to advancing Israel as a healthy, vibrant, and democratic society for all of its inhabitants. And this competition, Tarboot, is about culture, which is one of the key indicators of health for a society and one of the most important things that makes a society thrive. The competition, the Tarboot competition is run in collaboration with the Gessa Awards, and we're very happy to have this collaboration. And it is part of, we launched this competition as part of our celebrations around the completion of a new building for Israel's National Library, but it is an international competition that takes advantage of the new library in Israel to ask around the world, what can we do with technology to make culture in all of its wonderful manifestations a more exciting part of everyone's lives. And the competition's goal is to spur the creation of new technological solutions and uses that are innovative and make using cultural materials, songs, films, photos, literature, ideas, history, easier, better, more informative, and a much bigger part of everyone's lives, no matter where they are in the world. And we hope to have wonderful ideas from everywhere, because culture is an international phenomenon, and it's something that every country, I think, in the world has its own stories that it wants to use to learn and wants to learn about other people's stories. Like I said, the startup track is part of the Gessa Awards that we run together, that is run by Gessa and Mindset in Israel. And this track, I'll talk a little bit about how it's going to work and what we hope to see. Please use the chat to ask any questions. We also have with us the competition manager, Liron Moroz, who will be able to answer any questions that come up. As we move forward, you'll hear from the library, from the Gessa Awards, and also, like I said, from Adia Ron-Gilat, who we're so happy joined us. She's one of the jurors in the competition. She's the head of strategy at X, Alphabet's Moonshot Factory in Israel, and she will speak with us down the road. I'll start with the track itself, the competition track. This is a competition track for startups. And the competition track for startups is run as a two-stage competition, at the end of which is a $50,000 prize for the winning proposal. But in addition to the prize, we are extremely interested in having not only good ideas, but products that are developed. So we've set aside a total of $3 million for implementation of projects, not only in the startup track, but in all the tracks of the competition. The competition has 3 tracks: for students, for startups, and a general track. And we as a foundation have set aside $3 million for projects that are chosen to be implemented together with the National Library of Israel, to become, to go beyond the proof of concept idea and stage, and to become a product that is widely used in Israel and around the world. Ideas that are developed don't have to be developed about library materials or about content in the library, but they do have to be relevant for things that are collections of the sort that are in the National Library. So have to be at least able to be operated at scale at the National Library, as well as other institutions, museums, libraries, or anywhere else around the world. The first stage of the competition requires a relatively light submission, something along the lines of a 3-page submission or a 3-minute video explaining the idea, why you think it's a good idea, and why you think you can actually build the product that you're suggesting. After the first stage, the jurors will meet and will select finalists, and the finalists, we hope, will be able to develop a proof of concept that will be then presented at the final stage of the competition. The submission deadline is 26th of May, so in a month. It's not a lot of time, but we think it's enough time to present at least the basic idea and direction. And if you're selected, then there is time until around November 2022 to develop the full proof of concept. We'll also be offering finalists help with developing the final proof of concept product. There'll be $10,000, up to $10,000 available for each finalist. We also hope to have a workshop in Israel with finalists that will include mentoring from Israeli firms that have signed on as technology partners in the competition, and each of them have their own specialty that they can help with. And you can go to the website and see who these companies are and what sort of capabilities they have. And so I hope you find this meeting informative. There's also more information on the website, and we'll be monitoring the chat to be able to answer all your questions down the road. And please stay with us to the very end, where there'll be a more detailed description of types of materials you could use and how one could work with a library material specifically. Now I'm going to hand off to Avi Warshavsky, who's the head of Mindset, and is going to talk about how this Tarboot track fits within the broader GESA Awards. Avi?
Thank you, Asher. And really, 1 second. Really happy to be here, and I guess that some of the members today are coming to this meetup through the GESA Award community, and some from the Tarboot Award and from the library community. So I'll explain in a nutshell this marriage between the GESA Awards and the Tarboot competition. And the GESA Awards, as many of you know, is the biggest EdTech startup competition globally. And we find the collaboration with Tarboot extremely interesting for us, mainly because the GESA Awards is a competition about learning. And usually when we're thinking about learning, we're thinking about schools, and we're thinking about institutions that are delivering learning. And what I like with the angle of the Tarboot competition is that we are really thinking about ways of interacting with content. And as we know, in the last 2 decades, everything we do about content and about education, actually, and about learning have changed dramatically. It could be knowledge or time and space and communication and memorizing and expressing and etc. And all those domains have redefined the world of learning. And in this domain, we have to redefine the way we interact with the treasures of our cultures. And this is exactly what the challenge of the Tarboot competition brings. And it's a very unique angle to the GESA Awards. Just to give the perspective about the GESA Awards, for those of you who don't know the competition, we have in the database of GESA more than 6,000 startups globally. Last year, we had applications from 134 countries, which is almost all over the world. And we can see the demography. Most of the countries, the applications came from Europe, but we had a big surprise with Africa that became really big, and it's really a global initiative. And I hope to see this global perspective also in the application of the Tarboot track. This is the map of the applications of last year's of the finalists, and again we can see a very wide range. We are reaching this wide range thanks to an excellent group of partners. Some of them, I hope, are tonight with us, and each of those partners is running the competition in his own region, and together we're really reaching treasures in the world of startups that can meet the treasures of the Tarboot and the culture that we are looking at. So I really want to wish good luck to all their participants and the applicants, and really encourage you to apply. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Avi. And now we're going to hear a little bit about, for those of you who may be less familiar with what libraries have to offer and may only be thinking of books, I'm happy to have Yaron Deutscher with us. Yaron is the head of digital strategy at the National Library, and he has been developing and advancing these collections for many years. And he will talk about what the National Library has to offer, but also what libraries and cultural institutions in general have, and what materials one can work with in a competition like this. Yaron?
Perfect. So thank you, Asher, and thank you, Avi, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. I'll be talking briefly about the library and especially about the treasures, the cultural heritage that we hold and we try to engage people with, which is the purpose, the goal of the competition and of our strategy as a whole. So let me just share my screen. Can everybody see it? All right. So the National Library of Israel is in charge of collecting, preserving, and creating access to history. Oh, I'm sorry, that was too fast. To history, culture, and heritage of the State of Israel and the Jewish people worldwide. We're the only library in the world who has a double job, a double work, a double mission, and what we do in the last 10 or 15 years is digitizing everything or almost everything that we can. Because I'm gonna stop the share for a second because I apologize, but the presentation moves automatically and I'm gonna share another screen and do it just manually. All right, I'm sorry about that. So we've been digitizing almost everything. And when I say almost, is because the biggest challenge that we have is copyright, because popular materials from recent years are still in copyright. And so we digitize only what we can create free access to the public. And let's talk about the different kinds of materials and treasures that we have. So when you talk about a library, you're always starting with books. And so let's start with books. We have 150 scanned books already available through our API systems, which is basically the entire collection of public domain. Public domain means there is no copyright admission, no charge. The material is available to the humanity. This generally happens 70 years after the death of the author of the book. Of course, different materials have different copyright rules, and different countries have different copyright rules, but this generally applies to books everywhere. The major part of this collection, the books collection, was digitized in cooperation with Google in the Google Books project. And it consists of about 50% books in Hebrew and in Hebrew letters, which means other Jewish languages throughout history, which used the Hebrew alphabetical. And the other 50% is a mix of other languages, including English, French, Arabic, Russian, Latin, and many more. The books are available in high-res images and the OCR layer. The OCR is the optical recognition system, which enables us to take scanned text and make a digital text from it. And so this is about the books, but as I said, the books is only the beginning. And let's move to other kinds of formats. Let's talk about newspapers. 3 million newspaper pages. I don't know if maybe some of you are familiar with JPress, our a newspaper collection system. we've been digitizing along in cooperation with the Tel Aviv University hundreds of newspaper titles of Jewish communities throughout history from around the world. This consists of course, Hebrew and Israeli newspapers, but almost any language that you can imagine that Jews around the world printed papers in these languages, they are probably in our collection. And so English, French, Spanish, Yiddish, Arabic, Jewish Arabic, and Portuguese, and we've been moving lately to Latin America and to Eastern Europe, many languages there, Polish newspapers in Polish, and so on. This is an amazing collection with amazing possibilities, and also it consists of the scanned images, the scanned newspapers, already been cropped to articles, and the OCR layer is also included. A few words about manuscripts. 92,000 manuscripts scanned. Most of them are Hebrew manuscripts, not only from the National Library of Israel collection, but from other major collections from around the world. The smaller part of this collection is Latin and Islamic manuscripts. OCR is, of course, not included because these are manuscripts and not texts or printed texts. But these are, some of them are really important and rare, and some of them are very popular within the research community. And this is also an important part of our collection. Two other different kinds of formats are music and photographs. Music, we've been digitizing Israeli and Jewish music. This consists of the Kol Israel, the radio public broadcasting station collection, which is all out of copyright or usable, free of rights, free of royalties, and is available through our APIs. This is music from the 1940s throughout the 1980s. And this also is a very important piece of history, and also a very popular part of the library collection. Not a lot of people are aware of this collection, and this is one of the major reasons that we want to invite you guys to invest and find creative ways to make people engage with these materials. Historic photographs, 2.5 million photos. This is probably the largest photograph collection in the world of Israel, the land of Israel and the state of Israel. About 150 years of photographs from the early days of photographing in the 1870s, and moving on to the 20th century, a major newspaper photographic collection that took place throughout the history of Israel. And so this is also a very interesting part of the collection, because it is visual, opposed to books, newspapers, and others. And it also, I think, that you would find creative ideas to make people engage with these materials. A few other parts of the collection, I'll be moving fast. I'll try to be moving fast. Archival materials. There's about 3 million pages of archival materials. Archival materials consists of people's personal desks, or important people, authors, poets, people in politics, people who had some kind of creative effect on the history of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. And not all of it is available through the APIs because of copyright permissions, but it's also very interesting to find ways to engage with these materials. The maps collection is one of the most interesting visual collections that we have, about 12,000 maps. On the one hand written or hand painted maps from the 15th and 16th and 17th century, Christian maps describing the Holy Land in artistic ways, maps that includes dragons and sharks at sea. And moving to the other part of the collections are modern maps of the British Mandate and the Ottoman Empire that ruled Israel in recent centuries. 150,000 posters. We call it the ephemera collection. This is also an interesting description of history, containing posters of theater events and cinema films, and posters that were tabbed to the wall in Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods in Jerusalem. On the other hand, also a very special collection. Last word on video. About 30,000 hours of video, including mainly what we call oral history. Oral history is interviews with people that did important things in their lives. We have an important collection called Toldot Israel. These are interviews with people who were involved in the creation of the state of Israel in 1948 and the years before. And other parts of this collection are interviews with immigrants or immigration leaders from the Soviet Union and from Ethiopia. These are raw materials, which means long interviews, and again, the technology options and the creative ideas here are probably endless. Catching my breath here. As you can see, lots of materials, millions of materials, which are just waiting to be found, waiting to be engaged by people. I think that the online world enables us to find ways to connect people. I think that people are waiting for these materials. People want to engage with culture and history and music and art and religion, and not just information, but also recreation. And so this is what we're looking for. We're looking for connecting technology with these treasures in smart ways, in creative ways, finding new solutions to make them accessible, but not only accessible, make them usable by masses of people that can engage happily with our materials. This is our goal. So I'll be done here. Moving forward to Asher and Adi. And thank you. I'll be here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yaron. That was great. And I want to stress that what Yaron said, and this question is coming up in the chat, what Yaron talked about were examples of the types of materials you're likely to find in almost any cultural institution that you approach. The competition at the first stage doesn't require you to submit an application based on National Library of Israel materials. but films, oral histories, archives, posters, photos, manuscripts, books, of course, exist in all institutions, and many of these are online already. In fact, there's been a huge leap forward in the last 15 years of taking materials out of boxes that are in basements and putting them online on the web. But that's not enough. Now we realize we need to take a huge leap forward in getting them from being on the web generally to being in people's hands and in people's lives. And that's the goal of this competition. So you can submit an application based on materials from anywhere, certainly in the first stage. But one of the questions that will be asked is how widely applicable is your solution, and is it relevant for materials in the National Library? So if it is a very specific solution of a very specific collection, because of, say, language issues, that may be a question. But on most applications that you will develop for photos or music or data mining to create personal collections or any other solution, I would encourage you to develop something that can be broadly applicable. So applicable to library collections as well as collections from other places. Like Yaron said, we're very, very happy to have with us Yaron Gilat, who is one of the jurors of the competition. She's the head of strategy at X, which is Alphabet's Moonshot Factory in Israel. And I can't think of anyone who better represents the huge potential of combining creativity and technology has for actually changing the world in many ways. And Adi has agreed to come and talk to us a little bit about that nexus of technology and creativity and culture and what one can do with it. So Adi, thank you very much for joining us. And please, over to you.
Pleasure. So I'm not even sure I'll take up all the time you have allocated to me, because I'm sure I can see some of the hands are already up and I'm sure people have questions. But maybe I'll start by quickly introducing myself and talking a little bit about this problem space, this interesting intersection of worlds and the huge opportunity that it raises for all of us. So as Asher said, I am the general manager for X in Israel. X is the Moonshot Factory, the innovation lab of Google. And I think it's a perfect fit for what we're here to talk about today, because many of you might know that Google was started because of two guys that were writing their PhDs at Stanford, who were very passionate about organizing the world's information. They were super frustrated in the early days of the internet to not be able to search for what they were looking for and get the right answers. And this is what motivated them to even begin to think about Google, which started as a PhD thesis and then evolved into what we know today as Google. At X, we do breakthrough technology to solve many global problems, anything from access to energy, access to the internet, through developing culture, making sure we can feed 9 billion people. How do we promote early diagnosis of disease or prevention? And obviously, culture is intertwined into almost everything that we do. And when Asher and Liron reached out to me and asked if I would say a few words about the intersection of technology and culture, it was just so easy for me. I didn't even need to prepare any notes, because it's so obvious, I feel today, in the 21st century, that digitization and technology have had such an immense footprint on the continued development of our culture, of our heritage, of our knowledge, on how we live our lives and how we show up both inside our country and externally. I think the best two examples are applied to the actual creativity process. And then the second one is the actually sharing of that process. So when you look at the creativity process, we all used to actually write letters. People would write books, they would type, they would first handwrite the manuscript, and there would be a person whose sole job was to transfer the manuscript to typing it. Before it went to print, there were multiple replications of that tiresome process. There was no word processing. It wasn't an immediate process. And this applies throughout many, many aspects and facets of Tarboot, of our culture. It's not just with the written word. It's also with how we used to create film. It's with how we used to create music. Musicians would need to record themselves 1 million times before they had one shot of the perfect way they wanted the song to sound. Today, we're very, very far from that reality. Technology has enabled us to be creative in ways we never could be. 100 years ago, 80 years ago, but also 20 years ago. We now do digitized editing for video and for audio in ways that we couldn't do before. our animation and creativity processes have increased immensely because of the computerized capabilities that we now have. We are really able to create content and help our culture evolve and reflect where humanity is in ways we could not have done even 5 years ago, and certainly not in the previous century. So if there is an opportunity to bring this beautiful collection of content that does go back 150 years, this is it. I mean, it cannot be a richer opportunity than that. And then I think the second aspect that's very interesting, where technology has been very influential in our culture, is through the idea of sharing ideas. That it used to be that very few artists or very few authors were lucky enough to be world renowned. Were lucky enough to leave their shtetl or their town and even go beyond their country and have their art translated or showcased in other cultures, in other nations, in other places. In many ways, the digitization process we've all been through, and this is, by the way, not just true for culture, it's true for many, many other aspects of our lives, from communications, through transportation, through electricity. This process of digitization and transition from atoms to bits to electrons has just enabled to sort of flatten the world, to borrow from others' words, to really understand phenomenons and trends globally, to share ideas with like-minded people who might not be living here, to really influence and be influenced by smaller community circles that feel like they're right next door, even though they're 10 hours of time zones away or on the other side of the world. So I think from both of these perspectives, when you look at it, technology has huge potential to really influence our culture, how we create content, how we share ideas, and how we influence others. Now, specifically for this opportunity, I was thinking about how the work that I do at our lab intersects with this opportunity, and there are multiple lessons that I think would apply. So I wanted to encourage everyone who's on this call who's thinking of applying to sort of think about three key things that came up for me as I was considering this. So the first thing is really to focus on the problem or the opportunity. What is it that you really want to change? When you look at this vast collection of information, what do you wish there was in there, or how would you wish you could access it, or who would you wish would know about this that you want to fix using technology? So really understand what it is that you're trying to achieve, rather than just go directly to the content and see what's in there. The second idea that I had that I wanted to encourage you all to think about is to think about it globally. And the reason I think it's important is twofold. First, as was mentioned before me, this institution is unique, not just because it's the National Library. Almost every country has a national collection and a national library, but because our National Library also serves as the home for all the Jewish communities, for their content, for their knowledge, for their heritage, and in many ways for their culture. And so we would not want to create a collection or a tool that would be very, very focused on the needs of Israelis or specific communities within Israel, but rather really try to think globally. How can we serve all our users within and without of the country? And the second reason to think globally is because whatever tool or solution you create for this content, if you think globally, you will then be able to copy and paste it, hopefully, for other cultures, other institutions, other nations. So the opportunity would be much bigger than this specific competition and this specific collection of information and data, but rather something that could be transferable globally, and you could drive more value out of it, and others would be able to drive more value out of it. So that was the second thing that I wanted to encourage you to remember. And then the third thing, and Asher touched on this a couple of times, don't think in terms of a product that needs to be ready tomorrow. That we're very much in early days. We still have almost an entire month to think through what would your vision be for what you wish you can build. None of us are expecting you to come in with a ready-made product that's ready to start working and interact with users or clients. This isn't what we're looking for here. we're really looking for the right vision for tools that would open up this amazing collection, this immense amount of data and information to the masses for them to easily interact with it, use it, and drive the most value out of it. It doesn't have to be ready today. You'll then have multiple months to continue working on developing your concept into something useful, a tool, a product. So don't be inhibited by the timeline. The timeline is actually quite comfortable and flexible. So that's the third point that I wanted to bring out. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I'm sure Asher is happy to answer any question, Yaron and others from the library and from Nadiv.
Thank you very much, Adi. So now we have some time for questions. I think it's easiest if people can either write their questions in the chat or indicate that they want to ask a question. Also in the chat. I'll go over some of the questions that we already see here. The question over what materials do you have to use? I think we've addressed that a few times. Use something from anywhere, but think about it as applicable both to library collections, but other collections as well. At the first stage, there's no requirement, certainly, to use library materials, but you'll want to think about where you're going and is it relevant for materials that are cultural heritage materials versus, say, other materials. I see there's a question here about the type of book scans that the library has. We're going to hear soon from Habib Toledano, who is the head of the Open Library project at the National Library. He can talk more specifically about formats and standards that the library uses. There will be a recording of this meeting made available through the website. And anyone who submitted and wants to have some, has some questions could contact the competition staff and we'll be happy to answer questions. Is there anyone who wants to ask any other questions before we move on to the next stage? We also encourage I see that some people are talking about trying to find technological partners. We think that there may be opportunities for people to link up with each other. Some people may come from the content side and understand materials and their potential impact, but not have technology capabilities. So we hope you use these sessions. There's a Facebook page as well that you can use to connect with other people. So try to use these opportunities to find whether it's you're a technology person who has a great idea but wants to understand the content better, or a content person who would like to do something but needs a technology partner. We hope that you can use the platforms you provided to link things up. And as we look at applications coming in, we will take the freedom to also suggest to people to talk to each other if they're willing and if they complement people's capabilities in that way.
Asher, perhaps I can jump in.
Yeah.
I see there's a question for me. What, in my opinion, are the technologies that are the most wanted nowadays in these fields? So thank you. That's a really good question. I think at least from what I see from my seat, the world isn't lacking data and content. What the world is lacking is access to this rich collection of data and content. And so technologies that help either with access to content or with searching for the right content, the ability to really create digitized tools that can catalog, that can pull in the right answer to the question that you're asking, the ability to have deep neural networks that understand and make the right connections through AI. These are the kinds of technologies that I think are cutting edge and we are now seeing drive significant value for us.
See a question about collaboration between university and the competition. I think the partner can be a university, but that would not be in the startup track. I think there's a general track for applications, and if you're applying as a university or as part of a university, then that's probably the right track for you. And in terms of accessibility of National Library materials, that's exactly why we have with us Habib Toledano. The library has been working very hard on an open library project and APIs that make its content more accessible and usable. And Habib is here with us to talk a little bit about how that works, what's available, what
maybe
tools you
just
need.
Jump in a minute before Habib starts to talk about tech and APIs just to talk about copyright in general. We have clear instructions on our materials, which materials can be used to which purpose. Some materials are what we call public domain. This means free uses to all different kinds of uses, whether commercial or educational or editorial or private. Okay, this is the most general option. Most of the contents that are available in the API, through the API, are free of copyright, like I just described. A small part of the collection has some restrictions. These restrictions mainly are to commercial uses. So some of the collections, or part of the collections, are made to use only to educational or private uses, and not to commercial uses. Other contents or other works that are preserved and digitized, which are not available in copyright or have copyright restrictions, will not be available through the APIs. This doesn't necessarily mean that you should ignore this collection. If you have a creative idea that can overcome the copyright barrier, I know that some ideas are running through this area of cooperation with right holders and copyright holders and so on. So if this is your idea, let's talk about it and see what we can do. But mainly on our APIs, most of the materials are copyright free and can be used to all purposes. Okay, I hope this subject is clear. And if you have other questions, please do.
Just before we start, I see there's one question about the startup track versus a general track. Avi, could you say something about the criteria for startups to apply through the startup track versus the other tracks?
Gladly. I think we're looking for startups, which means that they are in a pretty initial stage. They are not an established companies. But from the other hand, we're looking for startups who have a tangible product. It's not just an idea. So I think those two criteria define some direction. I would add that when we're saying a startup, I think, and here I'm echoing what you said before in Asher, there are some startups out there that are doing stuff which is relevant for making treasures of culture to be more accessible, and this they can apply with their existing startup as long as it really brings the value that we're looking for. It not necessarily should be a startup that was designed specifically to answer this challenge. And of course, if there are startups who have like an initial idea that they moved a little bit here and there to make it relevant, of course, it's great as well. But it's also open for startups who are already have a solution that can be relevant for these kinds of treasures, and it's not necessarily should be connected directly to the specific Israeli content or so forth. It could be adjusted after.
Great, thank you. And now we'll talk a little more in detail about the actual collections at the library and how to get to them. And the person who's going to walk us through that is Haviv Toledano, head of the Open Library Project at the National Library. Haviv, please. Chaviv, I can't hear you.
Hear me better now?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, so I'll start again. Okay, and you can also see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, so hello all. I'm starting again. My name is Chaviv. I'm leading the Open Library project and some other projects in the library, technology-wise. And I'm happy to present you the APIs that were developed at the Open Library in order to allow access by developers and machines to a lot of materials that we have on the library. Yaron mentioned before that we have a lot of digital or digitized items on the National Library, and I'll show you in a brief how to access them. I also want to emphasize that the search API that I'll talk about it in a minute allow you to access not only digital items but also metadata of any other item that we have on the library, which can be relevant for any idea or ideas that are around the analyzing data or analyzing a number of items and so on. So what is the Open Library? Open Library has very few APIs to access our collections of data. We will be focused on three of them: the Search API, Manifest API, and Image API. Search API is like a search engine, but exclusive to the items of the library. Search API can provide an output of list of items. Obviously, the Search API for each item provide very few attributes of the metadata, or very few metadata attributes for each item, but you can get a list of items by the Search API, and I'll in a minute explain how you can narrow the search and how you can focus on collections that you want to check, access, etc. Manifest API is an API that allow you to get metadata of a specific item. Unlike the Search API that returns a list of items, the Manifest API provides data or metadata of a specific item, but detailed metadata, not only the name, title, and so on, but also links to the digital object itself, access right, which was mentioned and queried in this session, how exactly one can access specific items that are not restricted, and so on. So this information normally would be available for a specific item on the manifest. The Image API is an API that brings eventually the digital item itself, whether it's a picture, an audio file, and also a video. Video files can also be accessed by this API. So, as I said, the Search API bring a list of items, and Manifest and Image are specific for a specific item, a digital item. Okay, unlike Search API that return a list of items, including hard copy items, it would return the metadata of the item, even if it cannot be accessed by the web. But still, you can see that, for example, we have manuscripts, like, or manuscripts is not a good example actually because they are digitized, but a book that we only have in hard copy of it, you can get by the search API. It's metadata, but we will not be able to access it. Now I want to focus on the search API and its capabilities. Basically, the search API, like the screen or the screen of the search screen of the National Library itself, that you can access online on the web and get results. If you search for a certain phrase or something like that, the search API can bring or can return a similar output, but it would be like a machine output, a JSON format or XML format that would be easier for a developer / machine to read and process. But the capabilities are the same, or using the same a concept like the search, if one search in the web on the National Library website. So material type is one capability, which means you can narrow to search only books, only maps, only manuscripts, etc. You have a list of material types in a developer website that I'll show in a minute, that you can decide to focus only on a certain material type. Another capability for the search is obviously search by compression, which means that you can decide that you want to look for only items that a string of an author equals to the author metadata attribute. Another capability is the ability to narrow by date range or by language. Another one, which is very important, is by accessibility. You can decide to get only the items that are available online with no restriction, or available online but inside the National Library, or any item, whether this is an item that cannot be accessed by anyone that has no that is not the owner, or another. So all items is also an option. There is also for each one of these attributes, there is a list that you can see on the developer website. Last one is the availability, whether this is a digital item or not a digital item. And there are some more criteria, but these are the most important ones. Now what I want to show is a demonstration how to use these APIs. This is a very simple demonstration and very simple usage later on for a developer, whether this is by script, or obviously you can use it by a web command, as I will demonstrate in a minute. So what I'll show now is an example how to use a search API. What you can see over here in the command line is that I'm using a search API of the Open Library of the National Library, and I provided a few criteria. This example is to narrow and look for maps with a given title that I was looking for. I was trying to narrow and get a short list of output items. But obviously, if you will not narrow it by title, you will get hundreds, if not thousands, of items. In this example, you can see that there are two items that were returned on this search. And if I'm going to the first one, each one, each JSON that I'm currently showing is the metadata of the small amount of metadata attributes that are related to a specific item. here, if you are looking on the attribute cause relation, you can find the manifest. This is a link to the extended metadata of specific item. And by this, by clicking on the manifest, I'm actually activating the second API that I was talking earlier about, which is extended metadata for a specific item. Oh, okay. And here, as you can see there, you can see the metadata of a specific item, a specific map, an old map that is available on the National Library. If I'm going down in this metadata example, I can see that there is resource of that holds the digital item itself, and if I'm clicking on this digital item link, I'm getting the item itself. I want to emphasize here in this example, you can get the digital item itself, not the web page of the National Library that holds this digital item. This is the digital item itself. You can download it. You can embed it in your application, in your page, and this is a capability that can be important for ideas that you will bring that will use the National Library materials as part of your solution. Obviously, we can, if I'm going to the search API that brought these items, you can see also the item itself is also available as part of a item page of the National Library. Okay, if I'm clicking the ID of the first ID on the result, you will get the page of the National Library that holds this this item. In a minute, the item itself would be showed, the digital item itself. Just a minute. But this page that I'm presenting now is the page on the National Library of this item. And what I saw earlier, for some reason it's not loading, but this page that I'm showing now is the page of the item itself. Okay. Questions so far? Okay, for some reason it doesn't show up, so I'll continue. So now the next question is, okay, how do I use, where do I find the detailed explanation and description about these items? How can you get more information beside the verbal explanation that I just presented? So I'm sharing with you the Tarboot web page that points to the web page of the developers of the National Library. Okay, so Access National Library APIs leads to a developer page that the one that I'm showing now. This is a web page that is open for any one of you, and it lists the search API, the manifest, the image API, and also to the left side, you can see that there is an API key. This is a one-time API that require each one of you that want to use the search API. A sign-up is required to get a private key for using later the search API itself. So I'll show also a demonstration for. It's very intuitive, but still, just to show you. So this is the website. I mean, you have also here the address. That's the website of the National Library of Israel, and you have here links to to our APIs. I think that the most important one to read and understand is the search API. Search API has a request format, input, examples, and another important link is a Search API common usage, which provide you some examples how to use the search in order to get a certain population from the library using the Open Library APIs. So that's it. Basically, additional capabilities that we are considering to add for the Open Library API is search by text file. It was mentioned earlier that we have OCR text. A lot of OCR text in the National Library. Most of it is not indexed yet, but some of it is indexed. And for the newspapers, for example, have have OCR text that is indexed, and we are considering to add a capability to search inside the text. Also, search by collection. There are a lot of collection of data inside the National Library. Not only material types, but also collection of photographs, collection of ephemera items, and so on. So we are considering also to support a search by collections. That's it. Now, I think that the best way, I mean, if there are some technical questions specific about how to access the API problems, etc., I think that the best way would be to issue a question through the Tarboot site, and it will be forwarded to us. Sometimes we are gathering questions together and sending an answer. And I'm happy to help and to answer any question if you have any. So I'm done.
Thank you very much, Haviv. And thank you everyone for staying with us. I want to address a couple of questions that I see in the chat, and then see if we have any more questions. One question about, are we looking for tools that create access to the library's resources versus end user products? And this is an important question because the library does a fantastic job of creating access to its materials. It is probably one of the best libraries in the world in that respect, of digitizing materials and making them available freely online. This competition is about taking that extra step forward to create end products that users use, that enable users to take materials and use them in a variety of new ways. So that's absolutely the focus of the competition. You cannot submit more than one proposal. So submit a proposal you believe in, and I think is a good one. You can, I think, if you're using the same core technologies, one can point to various use cases, but it has to be clear. And maybe Adi, you have suggestions for people who have ideas they can't select from, what they should do with that. But I think in principle, we'll want one proposal per applicant. And there's a question about music and smart search. Haviv, do you have anything to say about that?
Just sorry. Yeah, I'm with you. Well, first of all, we have there are a lot of music files that can be accessed that are free of that have no restriction, and yeah, we would, I guess that we will welcome ideas of application or solution that would access the music files of the National Library and expose them. So yeah, it's a good idea, and we are looking for solutions. There is material for that, and we're looking for solutions that would expose these items.
Another question about budgets. Applications don't need budgets at this stage. It's a very early stage. You need good ideas that make clear what your vision is and some sense of why you think you can make that vision actually happen. At the next stage, one has to develop a more advanced product or proof of concept. The discussion of budget may come at the final stage where the jurors think that these are projects that are worthy of investment, and Yad Nadiv and the National Library decide to invest in particular projects to develop them. And in terms of the first application stage, like we said, it's up to 3 pages of text. That we don't want this to be too cumbersome or too difficult. It just has to present a vision and why you think it's a worthwhile vision and why you think you can make this vision a reality. So I want to thank, if we don't have any more questions, comments from maybe any of our other speakers. So thank you very much for everyone. We will make this this meeting available online. We're available and accessible to questions through the website. If you have questions, if you have an idea that you're not sure is relevant, just ask. We'll be very happy to help. And good luck to everyone. We think this is a wonderful opportunity to do really great things. So thank you for joining us, and I hope we will see all of you again at the application stages. And thank you to all our speakers for spending time with us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks to everyone. Take care. Bye.